the Citizen Government Review Committee. We're broadcasting to you from the first floor conference room at Topeka City Hall here on May 21, 2025. Would we take the roll, please?
Chair Count.
Here.
Committee members Jacobson.
Here.
Brocksterman. Boyd.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
And Sir.
Here.
All right, we have 5 present with committee member Brocksterman absent.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. You all have a moment to take a look at the May 7 minutes. And I would ask if there are any additions or corrections to be made to the draft. If not, do we have a motion to approve?
We need to change the time.
The start and end time, yeah, we
Yeah.
talked about that.
Okay.
So we
Oh, it's
got-
a done deal.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Got a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and then moved a second to approve the minutes as submitted. All in favor say aye.
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 We are, let me just take a minute here real quickly. We are kind of coming down to crunch time. And after the conferees are done, I think we need to pretty much piece together what we think the report's going to look like with the idea of making at least, if not final, semi-final edits in time for the next meeting, which is a week from today, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Brenda, I know I asked this question in the last meeting about your timeline.
Right. So typically timeline, ideally the governing body likes to have things attached to the agenda 2 weeks ahead of time. They post it as a preliminary agenda and then a final agenda. However, if you want to wait to the final agenda, which would be 1 week prior. So
Yeah.
that is also acceptable.
Yeah, I don't think 2 weeks is possible. So
So,
we have a
okay.
scheduled meeting next week and then
The following.
2 weeks. And
Yep, that'd
I
be
think we
fine.
would make final approval at the meeting on, what is that,
Yep.
June 11th?
11th, yes.
Okay.
Next week isn't June 7th,
No, the following. It's, yeah.
so it's not
Yeah,
next Wednesday,
whatever.
2 weeks
Yeah,
from. I
a
was
week
like,
from
wait a
there,
minute.
yeah.
Yeah.
7 days.
Okay, got it.
Correct.
Jim.
But we need to have all the writings
Submitted.
pretty much in final order by next week. So we've got a couple of writing assignments here. We'll
Okay.
talk about that.
Okay.
I think after the conferees. But right now, before we do the conferees, I've got 2 documents to add to the records. These are communications, emails that came to me. Thank you, Colonel. And this first one,
Is it one page? Oh.
you recall at the meeting last time, we agreed to invite the president of the CAC, Citizens Advisory Council, as a conferee. I've had a number of phone conversations with her over the last month. She was very willing to come and speak, but her wedding anniversary is today, and she has priorities, understandably. So what I asked her to do was, she offered to do with folks in the neighborhood associations at a meeting they had the night of our last meeting. She solicited any input that anybody might have regarding the work we're doing, and got one response from an unnamed person who's with the Valley Park NIA. And if you take a quick look at it, on the first page where it says, "Hi, Susan," that's where that communication begins. Again, it's an email to Susan McClatchery.
Okay.
And said, "I'd like to express my disappointment in the city with regard to items 3, 4, and 5. Those are references to our study topics. Number 3 being the failure of the city or questions about the city's ability to follow up on reports, studies, citizen input, et cetera. Item number 4 was just generally accountability, to have things, I know those are related topics, but separate but related. And number 5 was interlocal cooperation. And then in the text of the email, this individual goes on to make some more specific comments. And I think it was helpful. We have a couple more advisory bodies and plans that are identified as items that were not followed up on by the city for reasons unknown, but the Sustainability Advisory Board and the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Strategic Plan. My recollection is that the representatives of the League of Women Voters touched on one or both of those as well, that they had identified some work that they had done, study. They may have been part of the work, I think, of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Plan. I think they were part of that and had noted that that was, that they were concerned about the lack of action on that. And that's going back 15 years. And the rest of the email is talking about interlocal cooperation, which, obviously, as you know, is another one of our issues. So there you go on that one, and that would be part of the record. The other document that I received, I need to have as part of the record. Pass that around. Starts off with greetings, but it's not a notice from the draft board. You all remember Sarah and Muladine from the JUMP organization, that they have they communicated this message a few days ago, a week ago. And just to highlight a couple things, that, again, at the beginning of the report, the beginning of this email, talk about a track record of paying consultants to do studies and share recommendations, and then not follow through. And one of those, and I'm not raising it myself this time, but somebody else has raised it, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the 2020 housing study, and how long it's taken the city to implement recommendations that were set out at the timetable in the 2020 study. You also recall that when they made their presentation to us, they talked about one of their key issues was homelessness. And this has been an issue, and I don't know how many of you have heard comments about that topic outside of this room, outside of our meetings, but just the frustrations that some folks have had, that it seems like homelessness is studied ad nauseum, you know, and it's hard to identify advancements or improvements in the situations. I will grant that there likely have been, but the issue stays alive for years and years and years. So JUMP, obviously that's an important issue for them. In the last paragraph, they embraced the idea of a performance auditor, okay? And note that could be, you could work toward, having a performance auditor could work towards the follow-through on reports and so forth, and also improve accountability. So those two documents are in the record. And Dan, do we have our LinkedIn, our Zoom person? Okay, we have two conferees tonight. One is Doug Jones, who was the Johnson County auditor, and I'll tell you a little bit about him before he gets on. I don't believe I had mentioned at the last meeting that Doug was going to be on here, but he's agreed. He's volunteered to come over, volunteered to do it by Zoom. He's volunteering, okay? And I thought we'd take at least a few minutes out of our meeting time to hear from him and to answer some of the questions, even though we have a recommendation in hand, okay? So just wanted a little bit more information regarding the role of the city auditor and his perspective with a longtime city auditor. So Doug was, I mentioned to you before that he had been in Kansas City, Missouri, doing auditing work for over 30 years and was the city auditor for over 11 years. And since January of this year, he's been the auditor in Johnson County. He has about every degree you can think of, every certification you can think of. I stumbled onto him as I was going through the internet looking for local government auditors in Kansas, and came across him, and in reading through his vita, saw that he had a great involvement with the Mid-America Intergovernmental Audit Forum Executive Committee. He's the past chair of the Association of Local Government Auditors Advocacy Committee and is still working with that committee. So I hit the mother load, I think. No credit to me in that, just stumbled onto it. But Doug, are you there?
I'm only getting like a quarter of every fifth word.
That's because I'm not talking into my microphone. I've been told about that before. I'm sorry, but I was just embellishing your record. So
That's okay. Yeah, it's just really hard to hear. It's really garbled on my end. So,
can you hear me now?
okay.
Are you hearing me now?
So just give me a thumbs up when you want me to start.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you all for inviting me to talk with you about local government auditing. My name is Doug Jones. I'm the county auditor for Johnson County, Kansas. I've been that for about 3.5 months right now. Before then, I was auditing Kansas City, Missouri government for 31 years, the last 11.5 as the city auditor. But tonight I'm here in my capacity as a member of the Association of Local Government Auditors Advocacy Committee. And in the past, I was the chair of that committee for 3 years. So ALGA is available to support and assist you and the city council with information to help to consider establishing a independent performance government audit shop. And I want to briefly go over some of the key points and address a couple of questions that I understand that the committee does have that were brought up in your prior meetings. First of all, independent performance auditors and audit functions, they help hold the government accountable. We also recommend ways to improve services. We report on how government funds are being used. We also assess emerging risks. We also help ensure compliance with policies, laws, and regulations, and we also identify cost savings. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And that's a lot of this is in the information that I sent the committee a few weeks ago. Independence is a must for a government auditor. The audit function must be independent from the management side of the house that they are auditing. Independence and objectivity go hand in hand, and along with quality work, result in the credibility of your audit function. That is a hallmark for government auditors, as well as being a public servant. Those are significant hallmarks for what we do. Having the auditor appointed by and reporting to the elected governing body or maybe even audit committee provides that independence. The reporting structure means the government auditor and the audit function are external auditors, not internal auditors. Internal auditors report to management, and that creates management issues. The independent auditor should have no functional or administrative reporting to management whom they are auditing. Government auditors should follow government auditing standards, and that's kind of Doug's personal opinion. ALGA's model legislation also talks about the government auditing standards, and those are issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. That's the Government Accountability Office. You may have heard of GAO's audits. They do they're the government's auditors. I do understand some of your discussions are related to size of the audit shop. What size would be appropriate for Topeka? Many ALGA member audit offices are 1 to 2 member audit shops or 3 to 5 member audit shops. The budgets for many of those 1 to 2 person shops range between $100,000 to $500,000, but 3 to 5 person shop is $250,000 to $1 million. That's where many of them are. And this is coming from a 2024 benchmarking survey that ALGA did. It's kind of hard to get suss out the exact numbers because it's ranges and graphs are hard to see some of the information. And those are from member offices across the U.S. as well as Canada. So you're going to have California cities and you're going to have cities in Kansas as well. Other discussions I heard were related to the benefits of having an independent performance audit function and an auditor. The primary benefit is public accountability and transparency. That's the primary thing that a government auditor does. Provides that over government programs and activities. Other benefits do include reduced, avoided, or recovered costs, new revenues. You also get information for decision makers, as well as identifying ways to protect or manage public monies or assets. Based on the benchmark survey, it looks like the 1 to 2 person audit shops had a financial impact averaging about 500,000 a year over 5 years. So you'd have 1 year be closer to 500,000, a little over, a little under over a 5-year window. During my time as the Kansas City City Auditor, we identified $70 million in direct financial impacts. And we also identified $857 million in indirect financial impacts. Now, those are where we're looking at controls and processes that help manage or protect those public monies and assets. When you find a direct financial impact, that's where we make a recommendation to avoid a cost or add a new revenue stream. Sometimes it's as simple as, we haven't raised this fee in 7 years, it's time to raise that fee. Another question was whether the auditor could play a role in reviewing HR, or specifically discrimination and harassment policies to reduce those incidents. And yes, that is a valid audit topic. Auditor could review those processes, can make recommendations in that area to improve them, but the auditor should not be involved in conducting those investigations or making the decision on what disciplinary actions to take. That's management's job. When I was in Kansas City, we audited our EEO, our Equal Employment Opportunity Program, and the City of Austin just released another audit on their harassment and discrimination investigation. So that is a possible piece of work that audit offices could conduct. So really the time is yours. I'm here to answer questions that the committee may have. Because I could keep talking, but I'd rather answer the questions that you guys have.
Doug, can you hear me now? Are you able to hear me?
You're cutting out like I can hardly pick it up. I don't know what's going on with that mic.
Can someone else ask it?
Try, is this any better?
That one's better.
Okay. All right, let me ask the first
Brian,
question.
yeah.
One of our conferees at a meeting a while back, one of the people who came before the committee has had experience as a city and county manager and considerable experience working with auditors, municipal auditors, and had
I'm sorry, I did not pick up any of that.
Okay.
I don't know if it's on my end or what's going on.
Can anybody else talk and see what?
What do you want to ask?
But Hannes raised the issue about kind of the weaponization of audit. You have to be careful that the auditor doesn't become used by an elected official to.
Okay. And then the question is, has he experienced that, or?
Well, how do you guard against that?
Okay.
And
Can you hear me,
whether
Doug?
he's experienced that? Yeah.
Can you hear me, Doug?
Now, let me go grab a different speaker. Maybe it's with my iPad. Hang on a second.
I have another solution. I can instant message in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Now ask the question via chat.
Okay, they're saying if you're getting too close, it blows it out. So try not to find a happy medium.
Close, but not too close.
I did
Switched to
before
another
Jay
speaker
took
and
my
I'm still
mic.
having trouble hearing. I don't know.
I'll try again, Doug. Doug,
Hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can.
is that any better, Doug?
No.
Can anybody say something?
No, I don't think he can hear any of us.
So, Doug, can you hear us?
So have you experienced a council member using an auditor to go after staff? Is that what you're?
The weaponization of auditors by
Okay.
a rogue public
Against a
official is
department
like-
or a person, or a staff
Well,
member,
going
or
after an
both?
individual, going
Okay.
after a department, going after a program, whatever,
Okay.
just trying to
I'm so
exploit.
sorry. I am not picking up
Yeah.
anything that
Okay.
you guys are saying. in that
Can't you
room.
call him on the phone and ask him that way?
Yeah, can we
That would
Zoom?
be, that would be a great
Ah,
idea.
the chat.
Well, I thought he can't see the chat. The chat's fine. He just.
We will send him a fax.
Have you experienced a council member using an auditor to go after an individual? I have not. And that's where In
Or
Kansas
department.
City, I worked for all, you're hearing me okay, right? Perfect. So in Kansas City, I worked for all 13 council members. I did not conduct any audits because one council member or even the mayor said, hey, go do this audit. I might consider it as an audit topic that we consider during audit selection, but I wouldn't do it because one said go do it. If they wanted the city auditor to conduct a specific audit, they would pass a resolution as a body directing me to audit X, Y, or Z. And that's one way to minimize that type of issue that could happen. You know, to not politicize the function.
So who created the schedule? The auditing schedule? Did you do it or did the governing body?
Okay, I got a lot of, so the question was essentially, how do I select audits?
Yeah.
In Kansas City was one of two ways. The council as a body could pass a resolution saying, do an audit. And I tried to get involved in crafting that so that it was an audit that we knew what they were trying to accomplish and it was something that we could actually do. That happened from time to time. Overall, we picked all the audits and we did that through, you can do a number of ways, and I did a holistic way. We picked audit topics, we made a list, and we talked about them as a staff. I got topics from what I thought, what my staff thought. We got things from management. We asked the council. We even asked the public for their audit suggestions. We looked at what other audit shops were doing. So we took all those inputs and we went through a process to winnow that down to the 6, 8, 10 that we were going to do in a given year. So that was how we picked them in Kansas City. In Johnson County, we're still learning that process because we actually have an audit committee where we bring topics to the audit committee, and there's a process where we talk about it, and then those go to the board for approval. Other cities, all of the audits they conduct are given to them by their elected body. The Kansas Legislative Post audit, practically everything they do is assigned to them by that committee. But in Kansas City, I would say 90 to 95% of the audit work we did, we chose. Another question, is there concern that an auditor is viewed as another layer of bureaucracy? I don't see that as necessarily a bad word. Bureaucrats do the work of the public, and we help get things accomplished. And it's not so much another layer that people have to go through, because it's not like, well, you can't do something until the auditor's audited. You know, we don't direct activities. We come in and we look at things. You can look at things ahead of time, say we have a new program, somebody has some suggestions for the procedures for that program. You could look at that and give them recommendations based on recommended practices. Or you come in and look at that program after it's been running for a while. But I don't see the audit office as another layer of bureaucracy. It is a tool for government, for public accountability and transparency, and that is the biggest benefit of a government audit shop.
Is some other questions from folks? Zach?
How big is your staff in Johnson County?
How many staff? I have 7 positions, and we just made an offer to fill that 7th vacancy. It's been vacant for a while. Kansas City, we had 10 positions, and 15, 20 years ago, Kansas City had 16 to 19 positions.
How many audits a year do you do?
So what can the advocacy committee do to educate Topeka? That's the core of what that committee does. We send letters, we provide advice, we will, talk with whomever wants to talk with us about setting up an independent performance audit shop. And so it's all those materials that we have on our website that talk about, here's model legislation that you can use to craft how that function is set up from, I don't know if Topeka has ordinance, the code of ordinance or a charter. Kansas City, the city auditor was established 1867, but in 1925, there was a charter change to council management form of government, and that's when it became an independent audit function. And then there's some pieces of the city code that have other direction for duties and responsibilities. So one was voted on by the public, and then other things are voted on by the council. And I don't know if that's how it is in Topeka. So you could set that would be one safeguard to keeping the audit function. If it's in a charter that's voted on by the public, it can't be done away with very easily. Whereas if it's just a piece of city code, then that's less of a safeguard. But again, to get rid of that, it would have to be a vote of the elected body at that point. So those are some things. How many audits do you perform in a year? That's always the question. That's always a concern for the folks we work for and us as auditors. And it really depends on what you're looking at. You can have audits that take close to a year. We hate birthday audits. We'd rather get in and out quicker. So, but it's all what the nature of that audit is. So if you have an audit where the data is poor, you've got to fix the data or figure another way out. So it can take longer based on the data you're looking at. Or it could be a very simple audit where we did one looking at drones. We didn't have policies and procedures for drones, so we were able to stop the audit before doing any more deep field work and said, get procedures, we're done. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it takes longer. We did an HR audit where the data wasn't very good and we had to create the data set so that we could assess how long it was taking to hire because it didn't exist in the way that we needed it. So Kansas City, the last time, in 2024, we issued 9 performance audits of different sizes. Johnson County, we issued 4 last year, and we've issued 3 so far this year, and that's since January. So we're on a calendar year in Johnson County. And so our target is 7. We've got 3 done so far, and we have 4 more in progress. So we are on track for 7 audits. And it just really depends on the scope, nature of the audits, what you run into while you're doing the audit work. It just really depends. I've seen people say they reviewed an invoice and they called that an audit. I wouldn't call that an audit, but some people call that. What's next?
Do we have any more questions here? Doug, if Connie, maybe you have a better mic, I guess, than I do. Would you tell him that we're kind of have to move on to our agenda,
Yeah.
but we're very appreciative of what he had to say.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
sorry about the audio problems, all of those things.
Yeah. Thank you, Doug. We need to move on to the next agenda item because our meeting is scheduled for a certain amount of time. I really appreciate your input.
Well, you're welcome. Just remember, Alga Advocacy, we're here to help you guys with whatever information that we can provide. If we need to do more testimony, we are more than happy to do that. Again, thank you for asking me to come. Sorry it wasn't working well sound-wise on my end. I don't know.
That's fine.
You know, technology is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And again, you can go to the Alga website and look to see what's happening. You can go to the Kansas City, Missouri City Auditor's website to see the work that we did. You can go to the Johnson County Auditor's website and see the work that we're doing there right now. And
Yes.
that will give you a sense of what
Stuff we
a
got
government, an
last
independent
meeting
performance
has
government
a lot
audit
of
shop can do
information
for
in
the
it,
city.
What
So
Jim gave us last
thank you
night.
all,
I
and
looked at it today.
let me know if you have any more questions.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Doug.
Doug.
Thank you.
Do we know, has Topeka reached out to this group to set up an auditor before or not? Yes, we have.
I'm sorry, the advocacy group.
Yes, the ALGA, is that right?
Has
it?
Topeka
Yeah, has
ever
the city
reached
begun
out to
to-
them to use
yeah,
them
to
for an
create an
auditor to help
auditing-
us?
Not that
Do
I
we
know
know?
of.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I did not know they existed until a
Until
few
you
weeks ago.
stumbled across them.
If
Okay.
you, I shared the email that he
Yeah.
sent, and it had the links.
Yes.
But the other thing that you really ought to take a look at, I'd urge you to take a look at, is the Johnson County website for his office.
Okay.
I mean, they have, like Tammy, you're asking about the number of audits and all
Yeah.
that. They not only list the audits in each calendar year that they did, but they provide a really good summary of
what
each
it-
one. And I
Okay.
think if you look at the Kansas City, Missouri auditor website, it's the
Okay.
same kind of approach where they provide it's a really good service to the public to say what their
Very
findings were.
transparent about
Yes.
what they've done.
Yeah, including a number of audits that will say that they reviewed, I don't know, they reviewed inventories of property personal property that the county had, and they found no problems. If there are no
Okay.
problems, that's the audit report.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. And others will say they provided advice on recommendations to the governing body on how to adjust programs or
Okay.
whatever. So it's good stuff. It really is, I think. Okay. And I think you get the write-up about the audit recommendation. We'll maybe incorporate some of the things that Doug had to say. Our other conferee, Elish, are you ready to move on?
Yes.
Yes.
Another conferee is Bill Fyander. And I don't know how many of you know Bill. I've known him since he was a child, I think. He was, when he was the planning director here of the city of Topeka, came up to the ranks of the planning department. And in his last stint as planning director, he and I communicated, and he twisted everybody's arm and able to get me on the planning commission, and probably caught a lot of grief for that. But then, you said 3 years ago?
Yeah,
Washburn?
2.5 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. He's now a lecturer at Washburn University in the political science department, and he really is the public administration department for Washburn. I met with Bill yesterday and discussed some of the things the topics we had talked about to this date, and invited him to talk on any or all of those topics and anything else he had. He's worked under 5 city managers in the city, 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, interims
A handful.
and permanent, yeah.
Yeah, so he's very familiar with the city manager form of government
Counting right
and
now.
how the city managers run the place.
8.
How many?
8 city managers.
Wow.
That's how many we've had.
Yikes.
Well, we had 9, so I've had 8. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Jim. And thanks for the committee for having me. I'm glad I'm at the end because you did all your work already. So I have an easy job. Jim gave me a lot of all the reports and the issues that you had discussed. And so that was nice. You guys have done very good work and have turned over a number of stones here that, so you're not starting from scratch. So that's good. So when he asked me a couple weeks ago, I was in the throes of grading and finals, and so I'm out from under that cloud here a few days ago. So what I chose to kind of focus. So a couple things. I chose to focus on the charter specifically. I know there's some things here that are aren't necessarily changing charter sections and wording. But I looked at the charter because, quite honestly, I hadn't looked at it in a long time. It was nice to go back and have a refresher from my experience of being with the city and then now as a educator in government in the stuff you're actually talking about right here. So that was refreshing, and see if anything popped out to me. But yeah, and then the other thing is just I don't know that you've had somebody that was an administrator with Topeka at a level that had a lot of interaction between council and the city manager. And so I can provide some fresh or different eyes, let's put it that way. I'm not very fresh anymore, but different eyes on that if you haven't had that already. Because I think there's a nice little old quote from Ben Franklin about the Republic. They were all excited, everybody's excited to have a new republic in form of federalism in the national government. And he said, well, yeah, that's great. If republic's great if you can keep it. And I kind of feel the same way about the council manager form of government. It's great if you can actually keep it and stick to it. So you've done the work to affirm that's that's what you want to recommend, and you'll have another supporter for that. So I'm definitely a supporter of this form of government. What I'm not a supporter of, as a former administrator, as an educator now, is not keeping its integrity. And so that's the thing that kind of stepped out or popped out to me when I read the charter was there's these bright lines that are created in there between council and the administration. In terms and this administration, including the officers, the city manager and the executive officers. And there are some pretty bright lines there that, and it was a little bit shocking to me to read it, because it is very, it is pretty pointed. You know, when it says here that the council shall have no administrative powers, I mean, that's pretty, I don't know how else you can be more blunt than that. You know, they should have the powers of legislation. So that is that's pretty straightforward. And then you get into the other prohibitions of council, and that is basically no. Well, I don't want to say the wrong words here. But there shall not be any, in any manner, direct, supervise, or require, that's for hiring. So in terms of prohibitions for city council, they're not supposed to have any part of that. And that's the form of government that we've kind of chosen here, the voters have chosen. And so to the extent that are there ever times where you have those lines being crossed? I don't see anywhere in here where there's any accountability or enforcement of keeping the council form of government. And it's you know, this is your standard operating procedures here. And so at what point, if there is an intrusion, like political intrusion into personnel, political intrusion into the operations, which the charter clearly spells out, there's this bright line. So unless there's any enforcement of that or some sort of mechanism to curb any excesses of that, you know, then you just have an aspirational charter. It aspires to be this. Is it? And I think that's the thing that popped out to me. There's no enforcement of those bright lines between executive side of the government and the legislative side. So here it also says here prohibitions from city council, city managers. Okay, so they shall go solely through the city manager when for purposes of contacting appointed officers and employees. Neither the mayor nor individual district council members shall give orders to any such appointed officer or employee, either publicly or privately, but may request basic information necessary for council work. And so I'm here to say that that's just not how I remember how it works. So I want to be very blunt without casting any aspersions and to anybody in particular, because I don't know what the last couple of years have been. I've worked through January 2023. I've been a director, was a director for 10 years, a deputy director 10 years before that. So 20 years in that sort of executive position. Started out with a mayor form of government, transitioned into the council manager form of government. So I've kind of been on both sides. And so I can tell you the culture of it did not probably change maybe the way everybody thinks it changed or wanted it to change. There are still too many times for me to count the number of times that there was anywhere from an intrusion and a direction from council members to intimidation and influence. And that's, I don't think that's the sort of thing that the charter in spirit, certainly in its text, is aspiring to be. Now, there is, and I think it's not pointing a finger at anybody or any one thing, other than the fact that you kind of swim in those waters. The old adage, sorry to go back here for a second, but the old adage about culture is, you got two young fish swimming in the water, and an older fish comes, they pass by each other. The older fish says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish keep on swimming, and they look at each other and they say, "What's water?" And I think that's, whatever you're swimming in, you don't even know what that's the culture. You don't stop and say, "Oh, that's wrong," or "That's right." That's just what it is. And so, coming from a mayor form of government, strong mayor, there was a lot of that, a lot of intervention, I would say, in political intervention into the operations side and executive side, because that's the nature of it. And then as you transition into the council manager form, not all of that left. I mean, that was kind of the culture. And so the fact that the voters voted this in doesn't necessarily mean that automatically it happened. And I think that's one of the things, again, as I'm reading the charter, I had no idea what my thoughts were until I read the charter. Like, if there's one thing I wanted you to know, there is a problem here with enforcing, or at least, in the auditor, it was an interesting kind of mechanism there to use, but who enforces the charter? Who enforces the fact that there should be no direction given from council members to administrative staff? Who does that? Well, in reality, in practice, the city manager would be
the sheriff.
Yeah, exactly. And so what should happen in that case is that I go to the city manager and say, "Hey, this happened. I was either directed or I was bullied or whatever happened." And then the city manager has that discussion with them as a body or individually, whoever the individual was. But you can imagine the position that puts the city manager in. That is a tenuous position at best, as they're under the will of the council. And so walking that line is not easy. And that's why they have contracts. But that is, we'd like to think there's that check and balance. So we're talking about checks and balances here.
Yeah.
You would like to think there's that check in the system. I can't say that, I think it's there, but I don't believe it was very effective.
Bill, I've got a comment for you about enforcement, but before from your perspective, it seems like, elected officials are elected officials. They are accountable to their constituents. They need to have some responsiveness to their constituents, or they don't keep their job. Is there a difference in your mind between the council member who goes to somebody in Public Works and says, "There's a pothole on my street and I want it fixed," versus the council member who goes to a department head and says, I want you to hire my brother-in-law? Or is it
Yeah,
slippery slope?
exactly, yes. I think that's a great, there is a line. When you cross it is what I'm talking about. How do we know, how do they know? And the only way you would know is through the culture you have, or if there's some accountability, some check in that system. And the voters will not know what that is. That's not for them to, yes, they're going to elect and put somebody in a position to represent them that aligns with their views. They're not privy to sort of these.
Well, that's where you tie into the enforcement. The enforcement is the electoral process.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if the
you think that's-
electorate is informed, and that's the missing link here as to where you have disclosure. If there's the threat of disclosure, then that
Yes.
should put a damper on the misconduct, right, in theory?
Yeah, and I'm right. The idea here, I think, would be to be more public, or as you say, disclose any misconduct that runs afoul of the charter's instructions, and that or the threat of that is just something you don't have right now. You know, you don't have until it gets so out of control or so extreme that it does become more public.
Public knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, and so how do you nip that in the bud? How you kind of how can you be proactive about it is kind of what I'm talking about. Is and I know that if you're running for office, you're not you're not expected to know those lines. You're not expected to know exactly. You know, you're supposed to be brought into the culture of whatever's accepted practice, and then if you find yourself, doing something that violates
Crosses the line.
violates the charter intent. Who's there to tell
Yeah.
you? Who's there? And that's what we don't have as much. And if it's reinforced, I think you would have better practice on the legislative side to know, so it's not so as gray as it is now, or even known. I doubt most folks would know.
Could I ask Brenda a question? I should know this. Barry, does the governing body have a code of ethics? There is an adopted code of ethics, right?
Yes. But
How
they
closely
should have
does
a
it-
code of ethics.
How closely does it track with the charter? I mean, is the language to the effect that said, you shall not tell the city manager to hire my brother-in-law? I mean, is that, is it in the code of ethics, words to that effect? And I don't know.
That's a good question.
I don't think I've ever read or seen the code of ethics.
Well, I mean, some real life examples are, and I'm not here to disclose anything personally, but I certainly have had it happen to me. I've certainly had it happen to my colleagues. I certainly, whether it's who we contract with. There are individual not the whole body, but an individual council who makes it very clear what they want to the administration, not the city manager, to the department head, to the person in charge of that process.
It's not, don't hire my brother-in-law, it's hire my brother-in-law, hire my brother-in-law's company.
Sure, yeah, or, hey, I have a, I want you to hire somebody. I want you to hire this person. I certainly want you to give them a chance, is the first in, but, that becomes very political, which is the whole point of the manager form of government, is to depoliticize these actions and keep any, even appearances of that sort of
Improprieties.
impropriety. Yeah, and
Bill, of the 8 city managers that you've worked with, do you think any of them experienced the kind of issues you're talking about, and it might have hastened their departure, or?
Well, I mean, I know there's certainly, it is, I can't speak probably to them directly. My colleagues, I could, that certainly have hastened talent that left or did not come as a result of this sort of open knowledge of how this system is functioning, not by charter, but by practice. And it's very, yeah, I think I went back and I added up. Here, this is kind of, and this is a bit of an issue. I said we currently have a 9th city manager. Of the 8 city managers before, if you total their average tenure up, it is an average of 2.3 years. That includes the interims, and the interims are like a year. If you move the interims out, it's under 4 years average. That's a problem. I mean, that's a real problem for continuity and stability of a council manager form of government, because that is, 2 years, that's half the term of the council members. The under 3.7, 3 years and 7 months average for the permanent city managers, that's less than a term of a council member. So the so moving and having some stability, after a while, people don't want to work here. People don't want to go be employed here. So there is a shelf life, and so if you grind it and grind it long enough, you can get by and you can work with it. But I'm just saying, I think if you want to have, if you want to protect the charter and the form of government that the voters have voted in, having that continuity and protections of the charter are really quite important. And so I'm sorry, when I read it, it just popped. I really didn't have anything else to say. But this was, it just really jumped off the page as I finished it. So, yeah, I think talking with the auditor, this is sort of you had on your report, talked about whistleblowers and that sort of thing. It's still very tenuous for people to come forward and say, hey, we're not supposed to have 9 bosses. Nobody works well under that condition. And so if you have an open door for all 9 council people to influence and direct, nobody comes out and says, you need to do this or you need to do that. That sort of thing is pretty rare, but it is. I've had council people sit in my staff meetings for development, and they don't have to say a thing. That's extremely intimidating and influential to staff. And so that sort of stuff may be skirting the line here. Mm-hmm. But if there was a place that those sort of things could be addressed a little more than just through the city manager, if need be, I think you need some sort of mechanism. And I'm not here to tell you what it is, but I'm saying if you want to protect what you have and you feel this strongly about this form of government, you need to give this some serious thought.
Okay, Bill. So I've been holding it in. Okay, So in this whole thing of us meeting, initially, my thought for us would be, because everybody agrees to this form of government, they want this form of government, the charter says this, but so obviously this is it. How is it functioning, and is it functioning well? That's what I'm concerned about. I think that's why we are tasked here, because we know what our form of government is. We don't need to rewrite or rerun a wheel. So the charter, are you saying we are operating outside of the charter? Because that's what I'm hearing. Tell me if I'm hearing you wrong. We're operating outside of our charter for this form of government that everybody wants. And two, there is some, I don't want to say strong arm, I don't want to use mob terms. However, it is the potential for that form of strong arming. Not like, I'm not overtly going to say, hey, give this to Billy, my nephew, but the practice that they're operating in is such that that kind of thing is going on. Is that what I'm hearing? Because that's what I heard, and I need you to I need to unhear that, because what I hear you saying is it's not operating in the way it's intended.
I think that's probably a fair conclusion.
Oh, wow.
I think it's a fair conclusion from the operating side of my experience.
Okay.
And I'm not here to say what's going on right now. It may not be. But you also want to protect against that from happening, whether it's going on right now or not. But I'm just saying it has happened.
Okay.
I'm not saying it is happening. And I think you want to protect, you want to have something to protect against it going sideways in that.
Bill,
Okay, what's an example of the intrusion that you don't, I mean, we know you're not talking about now. Give me an example of what that looks like. What is that?
Probably, I mean, I have many, but I'm just, imagine a council person going off on a staff person and saying that they should be fired. There's an example. Nothing gets done about that.
There's no recourse for that.
I don't know what that
council member.
recourse is, other than to say, you shouldn't do that. And so whether I have to take that in my own hands, or what should happen is I go to the city manager and say, hey, this happened. Can you please remind, that's not appropriate. And I don't know if it happened or not. I mean, I don't know if there was follow-up or not. So I suspect not, because it kept happening.
Okay, Bill,
So
I'm
those
a
type of
counsel,
things
so-
are happening because we don't have a checks and balance for this system. That's the kind of stuff that happens and goes unchecked, because we don't have a check system.
If you think the
Is that
check
what-
is the voters and the city manager, I don't. I think you're being too generous. So I think, because the city manager, through no fault of their own, is in an extremely difficult position when that happens. And so I am not, the voters, I don't expect, unless they are knowledgeable of what kind of government we're running and what these sort of practices that we're seeing, I don't expect them to know. And so how can you make educated, informed decisions without that? So maybe the mechanism is some form of daylighting of potential, I don't want to use the term violation, but something that crosses the line.
Yeah, before we talk about enforcement, just one more thing, just to define the problem.
Sure.
What might be the problem? You talk about the council member coming in and saying, fire Joe Jones, right?
Sure.
Fire Joe. I want you to fire Joe. But I'm the council member, and a constituent comes to me and says, I just was dealing with the city agency and I ran across this employee, Joe Jones, who cursed at me and, just did a horrible job, and I'm angry about it. Now, so I got that information from a constituent who expects me to do something. Is there a problem with me going to the city manager and saying, here's the communication I had with my constituent, and you don't go to the point of saying fire Joe Jones, but you say you need to be aware that this
has happened.
We have a citizen
There's
who
some
made this allegation.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
lay it in the lap of the city manager. That's okay, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a council member, I'm an elected official. People have expectations. of
Yeah,
me.
in fact, there is a nice little clause here that I don't know, it's in here that talks about the council,
Yeah, you read
they
it
can
earlier.
express their view, well, the mayor and council members may, of course, express their views and fully and freely discuss with the city manager anything pertaining to, okay, this is about personnel, appointments, demotions, transfers, et cetera. So I think that language in there talks about, yes, there has to be an exchange of views and ideas. In fact, I worked extremely well with council people when they need something and there's an issue. That sort of thing I'm not talking about, because there's a good relationship and trust that gets built, that they need information to make informed decisions, and you happen to be the person, or your staff happens to be the person that has that. That's not what we're talking about. It's not an exchange of ideas that I'm referring to. It's a more overt suggestion that you should be doing this versus that, and that's the sort of thing that is that really harms
The morale.
the people that work here. Don't want to work here in that sort of atmosphere for long. Or people know that, and I know that for a fact, that there's word on the street, and that gets around. And so you have to somehow you have to create that culture that is that doesn't accept that sort of thing, and that's the challenge.
Do you have any ideas, Bill? I mean, you have thoughts on that? You walk the walk.
No,
Is it charter language?
I think there's.
Yeah,
I think you need an outlet. I think you need some third. And you're
Third
talking about an
party.
auditor, so I don't know if that could be the independent agent that can work through those things.
If I want to blow the whistle, who do I go to?
Well, that's the question. If I, and it doesn't happen because. It doesn't happen for obvious reasons. It doesn't. I don't. There's only so much that I can ask the city manager to correct behavior. It just at some point you just have to accept what it is, and you try to manage it. And so, but if you ask me, I don't know specifically detail wise, but if there is even some threat's too hard of a word, but there's a chance that of some behavior that would be disclosed either in a report to the council. It may not have to be public, or to the public. I think that's worth considering.
Behaviors, yeah.
I think it's worth considering. Then the other thing would be just from a training standpoint. I don't know that we do. I'm gonna look at you. Do you do any training beyond the orientation on the form of government stuff, or, I mean, no. Once you're in, once you're in.
Bill, back in the old days, the League of Kansas Municipalities, and there's a governing body institute, which is still being done.
Yes.
Now, I don't know what the contents of those programs are now, but in the old days, there was a lot of emphasis upon, what form of government are you under, a city administrator, city manager, or just a mayor council, and people staying in their lane, and, you provide that information. Now, I don't remember anybody ever from the city of Topeka ever attending a
Yeah,
governing body.
no.
I mean, it's not, big cities don't
We
do it.
do a civility training.
Civility?
Yeah, we call it some kind of civility training, which is supposed to be tailored to how people in, on council should act.
We are
Towards
asked
their-
to go.
Huh?
We are asked to go.
Mm.
It's whoever has time to go.
Mhm.
There's been one so far.
And to be fair, though, okay, like, we're not gonna act like we done had some humdingers of city managers. We had some city managers that was tripping, and they weren't good. And I think that the council, even, they might step in a little more, because we done had some issues, y'all. We done, we done thought something was gold, and it was gold plated, and then some of it was just brass. So they might have a tighter rein than they should, because, not making excuses for them, but, we didn't have some stuff, y'all.
Bill,
I want to
simplest-
jump in real quick, because I know that Mary had brought up, I think we had asked about code of ethics and stuff, and I think that you had it for a little bit, so.
Yeah, so I just wanted to circle back to that really quickly. They do have a code of ethics. I believe that's reviewed with them at orientation, and then it's periodically, certain sections of it are addressed when specific issues come up. The first section of it refers to the respect of the Constitution and the law, and it does require them to
Take
make.
an oath. I mean, they take
Well,
an
they
oath,
do
right?
take an oath to uphold both federal, state, and local law, but the Code of Ethics specifically calls out understanding and accurately applying city ordinances. There's also a provision that talks about respecting the rights of employees that come from city ordinance. So there are rules that require them to uphold the division of powers, so to speak, that Bill was talking about. And if I might, I did want to mention a couple other ways that division is enforced and the Code of Ethics is enforced. We're fortunate right now to have a mayor who's a good leader and helps the city manager kind of manage that divide. I know there's been a couple of occasions where he'll have conversations with individual council members, provide them with some of the background and advice on how to deal with a specific issue. And sometimes he helps try to finesse somebody who's maybe very passionate about an issue and overstepping. And then when specific issues come up that might require legal action or personnel action, the legal department will talk through some of the various options and what the parameters are for acting. So it's not like they're turned loose after orientation. They do have several lines of support. And I think one of you also asked what happens if someone is experiencing some of the behaviors that Bill was describing. The personnel manual does have a pretty robust section that talks about a complaint process. I mean, you're still relying on the city manager interjecting or getting the support of the mayor to go to bat and help, but we do have a process that employees can bring that to the attention of the city manager, the city attorney, and the human resources director.
Let me ask you this on that
Yeah.
point. Typically those procedures, it'd be if I'm a subordinate and I'm suffering some kind of discrimination or abuse, then I report that. There's a mechanism for reporting that. But if the abuse is coming from the outside, from an elected official, how does the policy work there? I report to my superior that I've had a communication or that I've had a run-in with a council member.
I mean, there's also options depending on who the source of the pressure is to run it up the chain directly to executives who are at a higher level, to the HR director, to the city attorney, or to the city manager.
The city attorney's office would investigate a complaint by an employee that I've been contacted improperly, I believe, by a council member. You would investigate that?
It would be something that the city manager would work, or I'm sorry, the city attorney would work with in conjunction with with HR and the city manager to determine next steps.
Okay. But I guess my question is, I can make a complaint.
Right.
But just like if I was a superior, I
Right.
could do it with a council member. Okay. Bill?
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, to be clear, we're talking about whistleblower protections, right? In
Talking about
using
what?
whistleblower protections. There's something in existence. Is that what you're finding here?
I mean, at the state, the federal level, yeah, there's protections for those who raise concerns.
What about the city?
If it gets to that level.
Yeah, and I mean, if,
I'm not sure what
Well, I mean, maybe that's the wrong term,
Yeah.
but that's the word I'm thinking when I'm hearing this.
Mhm.
It's spinning in my head. Am I incorrect? Which is possible.
I mean, often that's used to refer, it's referring to specific statutes and
Something
specific
that's
protected
law-breaking.
conduct. So I mean, when we're talking generically, it might fall under the protection of one of those statutes.
Okay.
It might
Okay.
not. I'd have to go pull the personnel manual to give you a more
Okay. So what I'm
encompassing
thinking
answer.
is not correct. It's not aligning. I gotcha.
No,
Thank
I
you.
keep coming back to the simple solution, or the simple step in terms of enforcement, is to actually amend the charter to put a penalty provision in. But and whatever that looks like, it's really difficult to, I don't think there's anything in there right now.
No, it doesn't talk to
I mean, you
to
have a
what happens if
violation
you-
of your oath that Mary
Yeah.
pointed out. I mean, I violated section whatever of the charter. But, you know, if there was censure, suspension, actually removal from office, but the idea of recommending that is one thing. The idea of actually a body adopting and
Sure.
imposing
Oh,
upon
no,
themselves is a
Want
little
to
far-fetched.
take a time out really quick. Dan, I don't know if, it looks like our meeting is off. I just wanted to make sure we were still being recorded and we were.
We're still streaming.
Okay,
Since
I just-
there was no one at the Zoom.
Perfect. I just thought the
Zoom
meeting shut
ended.
off, so wanted to
The
make
Zoom
sure.
ended.
I apologize for interrupting.
But I mean, is that even rational to discuss that, an actual penalty clause in the charter?
I think you would find if someone did the research, that there are cities that have charters that provide
penalty clauses.
a
Yeah,
penalty
that
for
was gonna be
interference.
my question.
Yeah.
Are there other council manager forms of government that have this kind of penalty clause in their charter? They might,
We
And
can take a look.
yeah.
You know, and I'm not, again, I don't know what, you know, even if state law addresses this or not, but certainly the charter would be the place for your particular city to say what happens when you do cross those lines, and you know, in a way that's, and I think I should say this, and anybody that crosses a line once and is reminded and doesn't do it again, that's probably not what we're talking about. When we're talking about repetitive, when we're talking about things that damage the morale repetitively and intimidate and
Bullying.
yeah, bullying for sure. Or you know, I was being told to maybe not, you know, maybe look the other way on something. That came from a council person. So, what do you do there? I don't know.
Puts you in a tough situation.
Yeah, and that is no easy. That to me, I don't know that your charter is going to fix that, but it certainly can lay another set of potential ground rules of what you do if there is intervention in a way that is pretty damaging.
Okay, so take that, Bill,
Yeah.
that right there. Okay, so Mary, Bill was to look the other way. Bill could, in theory, because we have the pieces, they're just not functioning right. There's no check to make sure it's functioning right, but we have all the pieces. So Bill was told that he would go, if that was me, I would go to the mayor if I'm a council, like I would go to the mayor, or would I go to the city manager in that instance? I'm just trying to get a picture of how would a person move. So I would go to city manager or mayor.
Or the auditor.
That we don't have. We don't have yet. We do.
So the process for making a complaint, as outlined in the personnel manual, would have an employee going to, if they feel comfortable, a direct supervisor. If they feel like it's something that needs to be escalated higher, they could go to HR, the city attorney, or the city manager. I suppose because most employees are also citizens of Topeka, that there is some latitude to talk to the mayor, although you have to be careful that you're acting in your individual capacity and not wearing your hat as a staff member representing the government. But yeah, typically you would go through your chain of command or escalate to those upper level executives.
And
So,
there
but a
has to be-
council will tell, but the councilman or woman was the one looked the other way. So you can't really go, for me, in my mind, I really couldn't
I think-
go there because they're the,
Right, so I think what you're getting at is that how do you investigate the boss?
so
right?
how do you do
investigate?
that?
And I think that the point there is right, like a company's handbook, where if I'm a new employee and I feel like I'm being discriminated against, I can go to HR, but there has to be more than one way, because what if I feel like HR is the one discriminating
Yeah.
against me?
Yeah,
So
that's
I
what
can
I'm
go.
saying, like, so who, wait,
So-
Mary,
and
what's that?
That's why there has to be more than one avenue. It can't just be, you go to HR, and if HR doesn't do anything about it, that's it. Like, it has to be, you can go to the city manager directly, or HR, or your direct supervisor, or the mayor if you feel like the administration, or your council person if you feel like the administration is the problem. If the council is the problem, then it would have to be worked out internally. I think the problem lies, in my head, the problem lies in you can't fire a city council person unless you bring it up to the entire council and there is a whole removal process.
That's what I'm saying.
So I think that just it's kind of a public accountability thing. If there's a problem, then there needs to be a report filed, and then it would need to come to light, whether it's through a city auditor or whether it's through HR or the city's legal department. There'd be some kind of public way to track those things once a report is filed and investigated to be found
So
true.
then if it's repetitive.
And then your boss is the voter,
Yeah.
and then they vote you in or don't vote you in because you've got complaints against you that you are rough arming the city staff.
And to kind of springboard off of Zach's point about the boss's boss being the voter, it does add a wrinkle that you don't have with your typical executive in a private company, right? You've got the voters' rights at issue, that this is who they've elected to represent them. So it's a more complicated process involving censure, is what it typically is. I don't remember off the top of my head and wasn't able to find it quickly if there is an impeachment process, because again, we're talking about individuals that are elected by the voters, and you've got to respect the workings of democracy.
The will of the voters.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I know at the county level, there's a recall process.
Right, and there is a
There
recall
is, yeah.
process at the municipal level as well.
Recall and ouster as well, but they're
Yeah.
complicated, they're
Yeah.
difficult.
Right,
and-
right, right.
Hard to complete.
And I'm
Yes.
wanting to say that is the process that we use for removal. I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not positive whether there's a mechanism where the 9 council members can remove one of their own. I think it does have to go to an ouster vote because the voters voted them in. It's got to be the voters who vote them out. But don't hold me to that. I'd want to double check that.
Ouster is turned over to the district attorney's office,
Yeah.
and it's handled by the district court.
Right.
For malfeasance and.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, and I would just kind of, to Mary's point there about the voters, yes, the voters actually elected this as your charter. So So you have two types of vote. You have a voter who has their representative and has the free will to vote for them or not. But then you have the city as a whole, the voters as a whole for the city saying, this is what we want. And so if the function of it is not what they voted for, then you have how do you
And that's
take
why
that back
we're
to the
here.
voters? So I guess is what you're.
That's why we're here.
And you can make, you can make changes, or the council can make changes to this charter without going to the voters, correct?
Mary?
You can do what?
The voter,
they
the
can
voters.
amend
The
the
council, the
charter.
governing body,
Yeah.
actually, the mayor wouldn't vote on that probably, on charter amendments.
Right, I think
Yeah.
It's a supermajority.
So the
requirement.
council could change it, and say, well, now we are going to be able to decide on certain personnel, for instance. And that doesn't have to go back to the voters. The voters, then the check would be, the next time the election is, oh, yeah, we didn't agree with that. Unfortunately, I think 4 of the 5 districts have no opposition this time. So, just something to think about.
So hard.
Well, I feel like this is
So,
a big old bomb,
I-
like we're not in compliance with the
Yeah,
charter.
everything was
Well,
going
and I don't
so
think-
well until
And I
tonight.
don't think that's it.
After
but-
tonight, nobody wants to. But I would really just want you to think about who is policing the charter. And that's kind of the thing that jumped out to me, and this is, I didn't intend to go over all of this stuff, but it was very
It's good.
obvious to me when I read it. That's all.
Disclosure and the threat of disclosure
Yeah.
would be the important step.
Because I don't know anybody knows that there is any penalty, so to speak, for stepping outside these lines. I don't
Wow.
think there is. It's and if you want, 10 years from now when this body meets, hopefully, if you have some of those mechanisms in place, if there's more public disclosure of some of these things, then the culture can correct itself. And in 10 years, you're not talking about this anymore. But I think it was, since I've been there since the beginning, I think I needed to let you know that. It's, and I will, also just say this is not a widespread sort of deal. It usually is isolated to a few. So I just want to make that clear. But then again, it does affect who you have working here and the efficiencies and the direction that they are getting. It's very difficult to work. The city manager can, because he's got 9 bosses, but the executives under the city manager report to one person, and so having a ninth of the council have more power than the 8th ninths is an issue. It can be it certainly can be an issue, but you walk that line because as I said, I've had many good relationships and got a lot of stuff done by interacting with council. But those were times where it was a much more collaborative sort of effort, information sharing, and that is very fruitful and productive. The other nonsense is not. Can you write? Yeah. Quotes,
I
nonsense.
just feel like we got a purpose dropped in our lap.
Anyway, so sorry to, yeah. This
No,
is your
this
last
is
meeting, right?
helpful.
So.
Oh, we got like 2 more meetings.
Oh,
This
okay.
is
Oh, gosh,
helpful.
okay. So something to ponder is all I would say, something to ponder as you look at the charter. And, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bill.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
Good
Appreciate
to
it.
see you. Yeah, it's just fun times.
And Chair, before we
You want me
move
to go
on.
start your car for you?
No, I
I'll have Zach do
it's
it.
so, it's so,
I got to vote today, but it's not here.
It's so funny because we were talking on the way, and I've known Councilwoman Hope for a long time, and, it's a small enough community that you're gonna know people, and that's just the way it is, so I don't mean to wanna chill that. That's not what we're here, or want the charter to do. It's for those times where you do need some accountability, so I'm because you know what I'm talking about. And it's not fun.
Part of it
all right.
is the public electing people of good character, good judgment, and, that, usually that happens, but not always.
Yeah. We all need reminders from time to time, and I think, and let me tell you, it doesn't have to be a council person for someone to say, look the other way. That can come from management, that can come from colleagues, that can come from, so that's a whole, but yes, if you want to protect the system, addressing that would be great. Okay?
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
For your time.
And Chair, before you move on to the next topic, between now and next week, I'm going to provide some additional guidance about the checks and the balances, some of the open questions that we have related to how you make changes to the charter. These are areas that I don't deal with in my day-to-day, so
Well-
I don't trust what I'm saying off the top of my head. I want to make sure we get you accurate information as you move into preparing your
The
report.
entirety of what I think Title II in the administration is a codification of the charter ordinance. So anything to add or delete or change in there requires another charter ordinance. And that is a supermajority vote requirement, is subject to a protest petition.
And I'm thinking that there are some that specifically call for a ballot vote, and that's what I want to double check. If we have a handful that have that requirement as opposed to just a simple vote by the council. So I'll confirm that and make sure we get you guys that information.
Well, while you're committed to this committee, Mary,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a reasonable request or not, but I'm interested in whether or not other cities in Kansas have penalty provisions relating to council members stepping over the line. And I've got 8 cities here. I would take 4 of them if you take 4 of them.
Okay,
Could you do that?
sure.
You'll take Wichita, Lawrence, Manhattan, and Salina. And I'll take Olathe, Emporia, Lenexa, and Overland Park.
Okay.
And I had a question for really anybody that can answer it from staff. So I know that some complaints from like the police department and things used to go to the Human Relations Commission. That was moved away a number of years ago into its own city committee. Is there anything like that for internal, like an HR committee of citizens, right? So when we've been on HRC,
Right.
it's mostly been about city policy, but it used to be including, internal complaints from internal
XYZ,
departments, right?
yeah.
I didn't know if there were any current boards or commissions that had that kind of jurisdiction now where they would handle complaints that weren't on city staff or anything like that, to where it's kind of an independent body. So I didn't know if that was still the case.
I know that our police and fire employees have the option to bring grievances, so to speak, to the Civil Service Commission. However, they also have the option under their contracts to bring it as a grievance.
Yeah.
Under their union contract, which moves up their chain of command, will eventually go to the Human Resources Director, and if there's still not a resolution, it then goes to a third-party arbitrator for resolution, and a lot of times they opt to take that process as opposed to bringing it to the Civil Service Commission. But I mean, that's the immediate example that I can think
Right.
of.
And that was kind of the example that I was also thinking of. I just didn't know what that process looked like. If it does go to the Civil Service Commission, like what power do they have, or do they just give a report to, like, the city manager that says we've found that this investigation should be investigated more? I didn't know what that process was like, but I didn't know if that had
Yeah.
anything to do with maybe giving something to an independent body that maybe already exists that could help.
I believe that if they opted to take that process and bring it to the Civil Service Commission, that the Civil Service Commission would make an ultimate decision on the issue. I'd want to go look at the ordinance
Sure.
and double check that. It's, like I said, it's something that we don't see happen very often, because they're very satisfied with their union grievance
Unions.
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So it's not exercised often. Management currently has kind of a similar process under the personnel procedure.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen management, non-union employees pushing,
Right, for any
For another-
independent, yeah.
yeah.
But
Okay.
the civil service could, if people chose that
They-
route.
right.
They could.
Right.
Make this, okay, so we got some, nobody uses it.
Yeah, yeah,
We do have
it's-
something in place.
It's one of
Okay.
two options.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, that's what I got on that one.
Okay, we've got other ground to cover here. Like I said, we need to put all the pieces together here in pretty short order. And Zach, you've got city manager.
Got all the
So are
things.
you going to make a fourth revised version?
I've got, what I have that has been submitted and was emailed out earlier today is a third draft of one and a first draft of a new one.
Right.
So like we talked about a couple of weeks ago.
I'm sorry, but we'll
Yep.
get to that in just a second here. But what I'm asking about, the conversations
He
tonight.
said you're gonna add some stuff. He wants you to add this.
I will continue to add that there was more support for the city council manager form. As of right now, unless someone tells me otherwise, I don't see any reason to change any of my recommendations so far. I think that we've been presented with a new case that we could talk about, but yes, I plan to add in that there was more discussion about manager form of government.
Well, I think we probably, tonight, we ought to at least make some preliminary recommendations as to whether or not we want to incorporate either item 1 or item 2, some of the things that Bill's talking about.
Sure.
And I hate to throw that back at you repeatedly, but you
No,
know,
well,
it's a
when-
fluid situation.
When you're ready to talk about my report, then I will talk about my report.
Okay, all right. Well, Connie, you had mentioned in an email that you'd working up some, I wasn't clear what you were.
Just general, thank you for appointing us. This is what we looked at. I mean, really broad introductory,
Okay, you got the
Thoughts.
introduction, okay?
if you could call it that.
It's an
yeah.
Could you do
executive summary.
something for next week's meeting? Following and I'm thinking a little bit of the template that Brenda sent out some time ago. You have introductory remarks. And I don't know, do you guys want to have anything about yourselves in there other than your
No.
name?
Not
phone
And we do
number?
have, and we do have 2 weeks, by the way. It's not next week, it's the week after that we meet.
Are you sure about that?
I'm sure about that.
The 27th?
Nope.
No, we're
The
meeting
We
on
don't
the
meet until the
7th,
first week of June.
June 7th.
I've got it on my
That's 2
calendar, June 4th and June 11th. And we do not meet on the 28th,
What day is today?
the 21st. I just want it that way. We've got 1 week break, and then we go 2 back-to-back weeks,
Yeah.
and then we're done.
All right,
Yeah.
well, okay,
So we have a little bit extra time, not just 1 week.
Yes.
or we could have a
Zach,
meeting
you are
next
correct.
week. What is the?
Jim.
Again, one more time, if you get everything by the 7th, or you can't do
1
the
week.
2-week thing with the governing body, but that's okay. We
Right,
don't care
1 week
about that.
prior. So June 10th. So the June 17th meeting is when you're presenting, so
Right.
we will need it by June 10th.
Okay.
It will post on
But if you
June
had,
12th.
if you had everything pretty much lined up at the first meeting in June, and then just final blessing on it at the meeting, second meeting in June,
Yes,
that's okay?
yes.
Okay, All right, I'll hold you to that. So, okay, so you got an introduction that Connie's going to do and have it ready at our next meeting, which everybody says is 2 weeks from now.
June 4.
Yep.
Thought we were going to have just a brief summary of recommendations, okay? And don't, I started to do one for everybody for all of the issues, and I'm thinking, no, let Zach do his.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
You know, so you can use, you know, any, I mean, I've got summaries here for number 1, 4, 5, and 6, okay? I didn't have anything for number 2, Zach, because that's when after I did number 1, I realized, you know, you really should be summarizing your own stuff, okay? And number 1, you can use any or all or none of what's in there, okay? Okay, but I want you all to take a look at the summaries. You know, number 4 is interlocal cooperation, which pretty brief, and then the auditor, and then the issue about changing the size of this committee. So any edits that you want to make to those summaries, you know, have them here at our next meeting, okay?
Okay.
Now, what's missing on this is the Brian's summary, and what is Brian's status?
do you
Not
mean?
here.
Well, he's not here.
know,
I haven't heard
like
from
you
him
said, what's
for
his
2
status?
weeks.
What
Well, is he still on the committee?
Yes.
Okay. I need to communicate with him. I think I've got his email address to ask him to prepare a summary, because I am not competent to summarize his issue paper. And I don't know if
Well, yeah,
anybody else
he-
wants to take a shot at
He
it.
gave us a draft last
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, we have a draft. It'd just be a
Did
matter of
he-
asking him to summarize it in
Okay.
like 2
Yeah.
or 3 paragraphs, if that's possible. Okay?
I'm sure he'll be able to do that.
So we got introduction, we got summary, and then we go into the issue papers. Zach?
I'm ready if you are.
Issue paper number 1 and number 2.
I got them all. I always come prepared. We'll start with the government structure. So as requested, this is a first draft now of a separated government structure issue paper, just mainly concerning manager form of government, council manager form of government. This was emailed out and it should be in your packet. Like I promised, I took a lot from my original statement, expanded upon it, and then changed the conferees. Instead of putting a paragraph, just listed everybody out that talked about it.
When
I
they
will-
presented.
Right, and when they presented, and after tonight, I will be adding one more. And then expanded on the actual recommendation, so it used to be like 2 sentences, and now I added in more of the actual conversations we've had and the reasonings behind them. I talked about that we had lengthy discussion around the topic, even beyond what was presented to us, and each time it was found that the current form of government satisfies the need to have an efficient and effective method of running the business of the city while still having accountability to the public, and goes on talking about creating stability, whereas a strong mayor created a little bit of instability with the susceptibility of change at least every 4 years. In a perfect system, that is. Granted, we just also heard that we've had a new city manager for less than an entire term. So there's an argument to be made there. But again, in a perfect system, you'd have a city manager for longer than a term. But other than that, I also know that I've talked to a lot of staff, just city staff, during other meetings or seeing people out in the community, and not once have I heard anyone talk poorly about the current system or the new city manager. It sounds like things are starting to improve, but obviously we're not city staff.
Pretty
so-
early, it's an early
Right.
game.
Yeah.
And I mean, we did hear, when we first started about the turnover, we did talk about that.
Yes.
Like, why,
Sure.
what's the problem, why they're not staying and all that. And then the city manager came, kind of dispelled some of that. But for me, okay, so another issue done came up for me, like, who is policing the charter? I mean, that's huge. Are we gonna add that? That's like I don't think that's in with the city manager. I think that's its own issue.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, we've been talking
I mean,
about it.
we can't act like this did not just happen. This, it did.
I think that, I mean, I don't know if it necessarily relates to the structure itself,
It doesn't.
although I can see why it would tie in closest to that, just because it's a very, I don't want to call it a basic level, a high level, you know, who, I mean, the city manager is the one that's in charge of administrating the city and the daily operations, and that's what this talks about, is what happens when those two lines merge together, appropriately or not.
Yeah, but this, who's policing the charter?
Right.
That's, for me, that's a different issue.
And I
than
think that maybe that does
Because that's
talk
them
about-
all, that's as a whole, the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, I don't disagree. I think it could be its own separate issue paper. I'll leave it at that. I'm not gonna add more to my plate. I was about to
That's what I was
volunteer
trying to
No.
separate that for
No,
you, Zach. I was trying to say,
no.
now this ain't that. This is different.
Yeah.
But then I've still got my elections, terms, and representation. Although, if we had any questions about the last time the city redistricted, we do have a member of the former redistricting body with us. Councilwoman Hofer was a part of the last redistricting group. So if we have any specific questions on that, I'm sure that she would be more than happy to come talk to us about it. But none of this has really changed. It's just, although I did add a little bit on the explanatory statement, but only because I changed a little bit here so they match. But it's nothing that we haven't already talked about. So there's really no change in this third draft. It just doesn't include the city manager stuff.
Brenda, we still have not a lot of but some inconsistency in terms of format. How do you want to resolve that? Or do you want to be the one that resolves that, or do you expect us to do it?
So I don't have a problem with formatting things for you. If you send me the information, it's in exactly,
How you want it.
yes,
for.
edited the way you want it to state. I can format it any way that you want to. That's not a big deal.
Well, I'm
Gotcha.
talking about little things like Zach, we'd identify conferees or public comment, you put the full name in there and write out the date. I use numbers, I mean, it's little things like that. We want them to be consistent, I think.
Sure, I can look for consistencies, and what I think would be the easiest to do is if we put that together and then I disseminate it to the group and let you all look at it and be like, hey, this is acceptable. But yeah, I mean, we can look for consistencies.
And I guess I want to be clear, I changed mine because I went back and watched our last meeting, and I assumed I was doing it correct this time, is that I just listed it, instead of doing the explanation, I did just list it
Yeah.
out this time.
Yeah.
Is this the way that you wanted it?
Yeah, it looks, it's fine. It's just,
Okay.
it's just a little bit different than mine, and you just want to, I think it's an easy fix to do one way or the other. And I'd be glad to defer to Brenda to do
Yeah.
it.
I can do, if there's even if you send, or if you want to send
Right.
his, and I can change it that way, you don't have to
Do you
spend
want
the
to
time to
flip
do
for
that. Jim, I absolutely do not care.
It's
Now,
pretty
y'all
important,
remember,
Zach.
Jim, remember what she said. Now, she's not gonna do no editing. She's already doing enough for us.
Just copy
Now-
and paste it.
This is the interlocal cooperation.
Pick one and
paper,
let's call it a day.
Did you
Pick
get one of
one.
these?
And it's just been cleaned up.
I just kind
a
of
little
took it out of
bit.
your hand.
Okay, but obviously no change to the recommendation. It's a,
Get up.
add conferees, and,
Stand. She stands.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm fine with that.
nobody objects to interlocal cooperation, right?
No.
So it's just pretty straightforward stuff, and I would admit the recommendation to create a body committed to interlocal government, interlocal agreements, interlocal cooperation is unlikely to happen.
I think that both these reports look quite similar.
I see what he means by
You
the
might want to have your
difference.
vision checked.
I mean, we want to
Well,
be succinct.
I
Yes,
see
you
a
wanna be
little bit
succinct.
different,
You
but
do. You want to be
basically
succinct
the same.
and fluid, so just pick one.
Yes.
That's not even hard.
If we're going to
Pick
get caught
one.
up in how we're listing conferees, we got different problems.
Just,
Your thought's different
just
than
pick
mine.
We got
one.
different
We're
problems.
not.
Just pick, it's all
Send
right.
it to me, Jim.
I will
I'll make
fix
it
it.
look
I will
I'll
fix
print
mine.
this.
I will
You
fix
send it to
mine.
Brenda,
me
give
and
us
all that
grace.
looks pretty like that.
Give us a grace.
And I'll
give us
send it to
grace.
Brenda.
We're
Absolutely.
sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, the fifth thing we have here is the auditor recommendation.
The
And
point of your conferees look different here.
the only thing that's been changed here is just adding the conferees and the public.
Don't you say it.
Public comment.
Say it.
Otherwise, everything is identical to the previous draft.
I love it.
And again, I've mentioned this repeatedly here. I'm asking you guys to take a look at all of these
Okay.
and whatever edits that you think are appropriate, you got to bring them back here. You know,
Okay.
even if it means there's 5 different sets of edits, you know, that's 5 different sets of edits, we'll get it resolved. Hopefully there won't be.
But I mean, we were pretty unanimous, Jim. We really were, like last meeting. We knew what we were
About-
gonna pick. Remember, this was gonna be a working one. We knew we had some conferees that got added, but we were in agreement of what.
What
the report-
issues, yeah, what the
We
issues
were
Just wanna make
already in
sure it's-
agreement of
it's
that.
the,
We're doing great.
I mean, we have a highly abbreviated approach deliberately. You know, just want to see if we capture the peanut, you know, of each one of these. This last one
I've been giving
that I
him-
just handed out just has to do with
Get them all
the,
now. That's
with this
This
body,
down there?
10 years from now.
That's
To
correct.
increase the size from 5 to 10.
Oh,
So if I could just make one suggestion, maybe once you guys get all of your thoughts together and things together and you send them to me, we can put together one working document to sit through and roll through. And
That would be
Before-
great.
Before the next,
That would be
Changes.
phenomenal.
before the next
Fantabulous.
meeting, you're saying?
If you can get those to me within the next week, we could have them before the next meeting.
absolutely.
Okay.
And Jim, you can do that because you're the one giving them to us. You got it all. Just send it on over,
Right,
Jim.
and that's what I mean, if you all want to send it to me
Send it on
in the
over.
formats that you
Exactly.
have, and then we can.
She's got it.
I can
Yeah,
put it
lay
in
'em
one
out,
working
yes.
document, and we can.
Then we all know what we're working.
Rockstrom, he can
I
send
like
it,
that
he
idea.
will.
Yep.
We're good. It's, yeah.
I feel like I had something to add, now I don't remember what it
Well, there must be something else to talk about, folks.
was. Oh, yes, I did
Well-
want to mention that Director Garrett has sent me the template for a PowerPoint
PowerPoint.
presentation.
Yes.
I just got that today. All I'm going to do with it is I'm going to take the order of our issues.
Yes.
And I'm just going to put them on a
Number
slide.
one.
That way, we at least get some.
The
A
full
pretty
text of the
picture.
recommendation?
Can you find a pretty picture with each issue?
I wouldn't put the full text because it's going to get really small for
No,
people to read.
you can't put the full
But
text,
I
but
will put just, it's going to be a very basic slideshow. I'll work on that. It will be done before our next meeting. If it needs adjusting, I
So we
can
can
do that.
preview it at the meeting?
You can preview. It's going to be like
basic.
10 slides or less, and it's going to be the headlines of each one. That way
Yeah.
everybody
You hear
can
that,
follow
Jim?
along.
Just a sentence that
It's
says.
just an
I-
exclamation point to
issue.
what
There
you're
will be,
saying.
I
there will be
agree.
that.
Can you have
I
little
agree.
animals walking across the
Oh, Lord.
bottom?
I can animate it. I could do the whole thing, but I won't.
Yeah.
People hate.
And the city of Topeka, we do have a template.
Yes,
that we
Dan
could-
sent me a
Dan
template.
sent it to
Yeah.
me,
I
so.
just got it today.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
it will look very similar to other committee reports.
Since we've got a little bit of time,
Liar.
let me ask you guys, because I'm a little muddled on this, okay? As to what Zach is supposed to be doing, what the consensus is to be doing on the issue that Bill raises. And if we find that there are, let me finish the thought here, hold on. If we identify penalty provisions, censure, you know, suspension, removal from office, and from any of these other cities, then we'll look at the text of that and we'll kick that around at the next meeting. But that is a possible recommendation that we would make to amend the charter ordinance to put an enforcement mechanism in for violations by elected officials. And I also want to take a look at the governing body code of ethics, and that's online. Could you send it to me?
I can for sure send it to you. It might be part of,
Internal.
that's what I was thinking, that it might be on the city council page, but I know that I have access to it through the internal intranet, and I can definitely,
Okay. Could you send it to me and send it to Zach? And anybody else want to see it?
You
Yeah.
could probably just send it to the committee.
Yes,
Yeah.
please, and thank you.
Do, council persons, do they sign the code of ethics or just are presented the code of ethics?
I don't know if you know the orientation process. I'd have
Question the
to.
new council member.
Did you have to sign a code of ethics at your orientation?
Okay.
Yes.
Can you please repeat?
Sign
Clarify
like,
in the mic. Or did she, it's just that one clarified that she.
So yes, council members are required to sign a code of ethics during orientation.
Okay. So then we will get a copy of those, and then maybe that, I mean, that could be our answer, right? If there's a code of ethics they sign and they violate them, and we lay out that, and maybe our recommendation is, you know, there needs to be a document of laying out, if there's a code of ethics violation, this is what happens, or this is
We
what
need a
should happen. Right.
process.
Like a step-by-step guide for
Yeah.
new council members on, or new staff members on, if a council person comes and talks to you and gives you direction in a inappropriate way, here's your path. Right, maybe that's part of it too. But I also would love to see the penalty clause.
Deterrence is a big deal, and the public can actually access the
Right.
the charter
I think
much
a lot of it's
easier than
just information-based,
the
right?
city
Get
code-
the information
than the
out, people
code of
get more
ethics, yeah.
comfortable.
I think we'll get, I know some others probably have that in. I want to see
What they have.
what that
Sure.
Yeah,
looks like.
what it
Yeah.
looks like and.
Is there a consensus? I'm not beating housing to death tonight, okay? But at the risk of beating the auditor issue to death, the idea that whistleblowers, an employee who gets a inappropriate request or contact by a council member or mayor, you know, whoever it is, that they can go to the auditor and in confidence, or have that confidence respected, and report that communication.
I don't want, we've
I
got
don't
8
know if
minutes.
the
I don't
auditor
know.
would be appropriate.
Because remember, we're recommending that there's a need, we see a need for one, but I don't think we need to tie that to the auditor.
I think that because we're
Yeah, I
tying the
don't think
auditor
so.
mostly
I'm
to
just
a
saying it would be-
performance
it's a-
review rather than an HR function,
Yeah.
I think that there's a, in my mind, a pretty big difference there between what could be an HR or even potentially a legal investigation, different from a program evaluation. I think
Yeah.
that there's and I think that
Exactly.
I don't think it should
blending
be
those
tied to
two
the auditor.
together,
I don't think it
then
should be
people are
tied.
going to
That'll
think of
gray
the
the
city auditor
lines
like
too
an
much.
HR, and then maybe it becomes a whole different thing. And also, that's a lot for, you know, what would probably be a 2, 3, maybe 5-person group to do on top of
Committee.
actual program evaluation. So,
Okay, I would mention it is specifically in the Johnson County auditor scope of services or duties, and also in the old Latha one. And I'm not sure, I couldn't speak of any of the others, but it's in that list, that laundry list of duties that the auditor has, you know,
All right.
it's listed.
Duly
includes
noted for
like
them.
internal
Okay.
investigations, like
of
Between-
malfeasance
Again,
or
it's, you know, part of the, I keep coming back to
influence.
this, it's part of this, you know, Kansas state law on ethics really relies heavily upon the threat of disclosure. You know, you keep people honest by saying, you know, you're gonna get caught, and it's gonna be publicized, and you might lose your public office, you know, once that happens. So you put that threat over people.
Yeah.
And if you've incorporated among the duties of your city auditor, that function, that is now a little menacing for people. They-
Sure.
You know, before
Well, and
they
I think
step
that
out
might
of
be in
line.
your penalty clause, right? Like if it's found that you've
Exactly,
been,
not
you know,
tied to the auditor.
then-
It's not tied to that.
Yeah, because it could be a city legal thing, or it could be could work its way up to an actual, like, case in the district attorney's office, or, you know, something like that, where those things are bound to be public, so. But we can figure that, I don't know if I have enough information to keep us talking for 5 minutes. I just don't, I'm just,
Well, I mean, we have I'm just saying we have our recommendation already for our thoughts on the auditor. And we had a consensus of the auditor portion, which we're all for.
yep, good for the
Everybody was
auditors.
for it.
Yeah.
Remember, Jim, we was all for it. It's not now.
Good people.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's why we're all here.
Jim's
Yeah,
my guy.
we've got 6 minutes, so unless we've got 6 minutes to fill, I would make a motion to adjourn,
Second.
unless there's any
Let's
discussion,
ju-
obviously.
Jim wants his 6 minutes.
So was there a motion made?
I made a motion, and
He wants
look, I don't
his
get to do
6
this. I don't get
minutes.
to do this very often,
Motion,
so I definitely
second,
made a
and it's
motion.
not a debatable motion, so we have to call the vote on it. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye.
Majority rules. Goodbye.
Can you,
Okay.
can you,
2 weeks, and Brenda, we're here again in 2 weeks. That's a daytime meeting?
Correct, 11 to 1, 11
Yep.
a.m. to 1 p.m. So the meeting's adjourned.
can you, yeah.
Are we, everything,
Yep.
I know the meeting's over.